Yes, I can. Welcome to the June edition of the webinar. We've got Dr. Sue Robinson and Mark Holdsworth from Forest Hill Conservation Dogs, and they're going to talk to us about rodent eradication and biosecurity. Over to you guys.
Yeah, g'day. Thanks for that, Emma. Yeah, can everyone, you can hear me clearly, hopefully? Yeah, so yeah, we're here. We're actually out doing a rat eradication program on George Rocks at the moment. So we've got fairly marginal reception, so hopefully everyone can hear what I'm saying. We thought we'd give a little presentation about our experience with rodent eradication and biosecurity on Macquarie Island and Lord Howe Island, which happen to be World Heritage areas. So Sue has been one of the key members of the rat eradication program and in fact cat eradication program on Macquarie Island over the past decades, and that's principally through the then Parks and Wildlife Service, but now Biosecurity Tasmania, and we've been lucky enough to be involved with the verification of the Lord Howe Island rat eradication program more recently, using some of our own personal dogs. So we've had some amazing experiences in completely different climates. One is a sub-Antarctic island and the other one is a semi-tropical island. So there's some interesting challenges in both of those areas, and we'd just like to run you through some of those challenges and these
Hi everyone, seems like we've got a freezing. If you can unmute, if you can hear us.
Hi. Yeah, hello, we can hear you.
Okay, sorry, must be Mark and Sue that
We seem to have lost them online. They've disappeared.
Yeah, I think he did say he's not, yeah, because they're in quite a remote location. I understand that must be why this has happened. We'll give them, I think hopefully they'll come back on.
Emma,
everyone
okay. Did you hear me? What did I get to, Emma?
We didn't. We really only heard about the remoteness of the two locations, and then it went silent. So.
Okay.
No.
Okay.
Ironically, that's ironic, isn't it?
Okay. All right. So we're. I'll go back over what we've quickly. So. Yes, so Sue has spent considerable time on Macquarie Island, sub-Antarctic Island, involved in the rodent eradication and also rabbits and cats, but she'll talk about the biosecurity principally of that successful rodent eradication program. And I'll talk about the Lord Howe Island rodent eradication program and verification for that program with using dogs. So I'll hand over to Sue to talk about Macquarie Island. Hopefully you can still hear us there.
Yes, you're good. Keep going.
Okay.
Well, we might just check in.
Okay, over to Sue.
Okay, yeah, hi everyone. Yeah, some of my very earliest work handling conservation dogs was on Macquarie Island for the cat eradication, which was way back in the late 90s, early 2000s. and that basically started me off in my career clearing islands of pests and using dogs as a tool to help with that work. So Macquarie Island is a World Heritage Area, and it's about 12,500 hectares. It's a long, skinny island running north-south. It's a World Heritage Area for its geological values. It's a raised piece of deep ocean sea floor, which should be sitting at about 4,000 meters below, but it's at the surface, so it's really quite unique. And then, of course, plastered on the top of that is a whole lot of vegetation and a whole bunch of seabirds and seals. In the early years, which was the 1800s, sealers brought rats and mice and cats and rabbits, and over the years, these pest species have been removed. So we still got you? You still there?
We are.
Yep, we're here.
Yep. Okay. I'm just going to keep checking in because I can't tell. Okay. So so after the cats in the early 2000s, there was a big push to remove the rats, mice, and rabbits from the island in one go with the development of GPS. What's the word? There's another, I can't think of it. There's a really detailed type of GPS for flying bait lines, which is what was used on Lord Howe Island as well. And so Macquarie was one of the early ones for that. The earliest one was Campbell, and then it went on to Macquarie Island once Campbell Island was successful. And so the aerial baiting is very key to removing rodents from large islands, where baits can be basically sewn over the island in a very exact pattern. And so the plan is that all the rodents eat the baits. Rabbits are a little bit more difficult. The rabbits will eat some baits, but not all the rabbits will eat baits. So for Macquarie Island, calicivirus was put in, and this was happening around 2010, 2011. Calicivirus took out about 90% of the population of rabbits, and then the last 10% was basically trapped out and hunted down using dogs. So if we go to the next slide, I can do that, right? Okay, so for the rabbit and rodent work, these dogs. There was a huge dog team for this, the rabbit end of the program, for the rabbit side of the program for Macquarie Island. It was thought that there would be, at least 1,000 rabbits left over from the baiting and the calicivirus. It ended up there was quite a few less than that, but a big dog team was trained. There were 7 Springer Spaniels trained by Steve Austin, and then there were 4 Labradors, 4 or 5 perhaps Labradors trained in New Zealand by Gus Nopers and another 1 or 2 people whose names elude me. And then subsequent to that, another terrier called Tummer, he came along as well. He was a year later. So there were 12 dogs for hunting rabbits on the island, and then there was another 3, because I think there's 15 on that screen. There was another 3 dogs that were used for rodents for the verification. So going back to the rabbits, once the big knockdown occurred, the 11 or 12 rabbit hunting dogs were part of the big team there, and they scoured the island looking for a sign of rabbits. The dogs were absolutely key to finding the last rabbits, and there weren't 1,000 rabbits left, there were 20. And so the dogs could move straight into finding these really difficult animals, which were spread far and wide over the island. And they found them between winter and summer. The last rabbit was killed in December in 2011. So there was actually a lot less work to do than was thought, but the dogs were very key. Even though there was less work, that's completely fine. And then they spent another 2 years on the island looking for any further rabbits. So that was pretty much the rabbit dogs. And then there were 3 rodent dogs that came in later for the verification work. and there's some, and that would have been Chase and Bale and Cody. They came in from New Zealand, and 2 years after the last rat, which would have been 2011, they came in 2013, and they did a year on the island, the 2013 year on the island, looking for any sign of rodents, and they didn't find any sign of live rodents. They found lots of old nests, and they found a lot of old nests with bait caged in it and dead rats curled around the bait. And so Leona and Angela and the 3 dogs spent a lot of time doing that. So subsequent to all that, now that the island is clear of rodents and rabbits, the main part of my work is maintaining the biosecurity of that island now that it is rodent free. And so I have my terrier Nui. He's checking some cargo there. I'm just going to check in. Can you still hear me? I'm still connected?
Absolutely.
Yeah, okay, great. So the Australian Antarctic Division oversees the logistics for Macquarie Island and part of the biosecurity process. It's a 5-stage process. I won't go through the whole lot, but one of those stages is having the dog check all the cargo. And so the cargo is everything that goes in on the ship during the resupply to Macquarie Island. It's all the expeditioner cargo. And we check the ship when it comes in to go to Macquarie Island. And the facility that I'm standing out front of there is called the Cargo Biosecurity Centre. And inside that we have a couple of sections, one of which is all the cargo goes into the first section. It's completely unpacked and checked. And then it goes into the rodent-free section. And that's the bit where Nui and I work. And we go in there and we check all the cargo once it's decided that once it's all been repacked. So the season for the Antarctic resupplies, which includes all the bases, the 3 Antarctic bases and Macquarie Island, is between October and March. And so every week we spend a couple of hours in the Biosecurity Centre checking all the cargo that's come in and rechecking everything that's already there. And we do that all the way through the season. Sometimes there's a ship in November to go to Macquarie Island. We check the ship, we check the passengers and all their cargo, and off they go. We usually go in March, which is the very big resupply. There's a full refueling. It's a full resupply of all the food material. So there could be 70 cage pallets of food. And Nui's checking all of those before they go. He checks the ship. We check everything once it's on the ship. We go with the ship to the island. And then we're one of the first lots to come off the island. There's Nui going down the what's called the bunker door. So he's on his way down to the Zodiac at the bottom, and we go ashore. So we check the station and we check the centre that receives the shed. It's not really because it's an old station. We've basically got the old helicopter shed. That's our cargo receiving centre, and we work in there for a week checking all the cargoes that comes in. So this is all about making sure that no rodents ever make it back onto Macquarie Island. Oh, so there's Nui in the Zodiac. He's got his little harness on. You can get these harnesses, especially for dogs, even for small dogs. And so that's incredibly useful, having the handles and having them rated for dogs to be, lifted out of helicopters or out of bunker doors or whatever. So we're going ashore there on the island. And here we are. So it's quite a cold and windswept place. Nui has 1 or 2 jackets on all the time because he's not acclimatized, because we basically go from a heated ship onto the island. He has 1 or 2 jackets. Usually has in a thermal jacket and an outer jacket to keep him warm. He's got heated accommodation on the island in the downtime. So this is Nui doing some of his work. So he might be on or off lead depending on where we're working. On the left, he's in a cage pellet with a whole lot of cargo. So we take the lid off the cage pellet and Nui jumps in there and has another sniff to make sure there's no rodent scent. On the right-hand side, this is where I've actually planted some rodent scent for him underneath this, down that crack underneath the package, and so he's letting me know. So he will bark and dig, and his whole demeanour changes. It's a pretty standard terrier response to I've found something really interesting, found the target. So he's having a go at that. The reward that I use for him, if I've actually, during training, if he's actually got a live mouse or rat planted somewhere, it's not always convenient to give him the live animal to kill. That's not really what we do. But he has two toys, depending on how he feels. He's got a fluffy toy with a rope for a tug toy, and we've also got a ball reward. So he's got two rewards, and that's what he really happily works for. But he's incredibly keen on live stuff, as you know, as a terrier would be. So because there's so many cage pellets to check, we can be checking over 100 cage pellets, you know, 30, 40 a day. I just made up this little ramp for him because he gets a bit tired of being picked up all the time. I don't want him jumping up and down, so he's got his own ramp. And so he's quite, as soon as you put the ramp on, he just runs up and he checks everything, and then comes back down again. So I don't have to pick him up, and he prefers that. And you can see he's got two jackets on there. He's got an undercoat and an overcoat, because it's around 2 or 3 degrees, so it's pretty cool. Just a couple of outside pictures of Macquarie Island. There's no trees, it's quite desolate. Do get some really beautiful days. Once we've done all the cargo checking and there's no more cargo to come in, all the rubbish is sent back out to the ship, and that's not of interest to us. So then we go for a walk down the island and we check field huts, and we check around penguin colonies and any other areas where rodents might potentially be. One area we do check is the sites where the tourists land. So potentially tourists could be bringing in rodents, and so we've got some places down the island that we walk to, or maybe we take a helicopter to, and we jump out and check those areas for a couple of hours to see if there's anything going on. That might be it for me. Okay, I'll just hand over to Mark.
Okay, thanks, Sue. Yeah, so Lord Howe Island is a completely different environment to work in, and as many of you know, it's subtropical and off the east coast of Australia, about 500 or 600 kilometres east of New South Wales. It's a World Heritage Area as well, much smaller than the Macquarie Island, only about 14 square kilometres. But similarly rugged. It's a volcanic geology, much higher than Macquarie Island, and it's covered in sort of rainforest and coastal scrub. But it's also got, importantly, a human population on there, with several hundred houses and private properties. Now, similarly to Macquarie Island, there was a rodent eradication program dropping baits across the wild areas, the reserves. But because we've got a human there is a human population there, you couldn't be dropping rat baits on private properties. So the program, the Rodent Eradication program, run by the Lord Howe Island Board with Commonwealth money, with the assistance of Commonwealth money, came up with a plan to use mouse and rat bait stations, and a network was set up 10 metres apart, so these lockable bait stations on the private properties, and also some hand baiting in the buffer areas. This was commenced earlier last year. You there still there, Emma?
Yep, we're good.
So the baiting was commenced, I think, April last year, and then it swings into verification using different monitoring tools. tracking stations, and also dogs are part of the monitoring to establish how successful it is. In respect to the wild areas, there's no monitoring done there because for at least 2 years, but because the private properties may hold rats or mice, and because you've just got sheds and junk and rubbish and under houses, there's so much more possibility that the rats and mice could be hanging in there, and the bait density is much lower because you've only got the 10-metre bait stations. Anyway, so we were lucky enough to be called in to assist. What had happened, and this is one of the issues that we need to consider when using dogs, is having sufficient dogs to make sure you've got enough effort and making allowances for injury and other work. So the Lord Howe Island Board had 2 permanent dogs, and there was some other dogs from Steve Austin that were contracted to assist with the detection work. But the Lord Howe Island dogs are also used for biosecurity checks on the ship that comes, the supply ship that comes to the island every fortnight, and also the aircraft. And so they were doing that sort of work as well, including flying to Port Macquarie. So it's a lot of effort, and we've also got to have staff time, or the staff have to take time off. So it was soon realised that, I mean, also there was one of the dogs that had become injured temporarily. So the Lord Howe Island Board and the managers of the Rodent Eradication program realised that they were a bit short-staffed in terms of dogs, and there was a bit of a request to go around to see who was available. So Sue and I were lucky enough to be able to find some time to be able to do this for them. So we initially only took Nui, but we also took Clay. So on the left of the screen is Clay. She's related to the famous Tui from New Zealand. She's the famous line of border terriers. There's probably 30 or 40 come from descendants from her. And Nui is actually her son. Clay's getting towards the end of her career, and Nui is just beginning. And so transport is via commercial aircraft, and that was a bit of a logistical challenge, but we managed to get them there. As I mentioned, there's lockable bait stations. These are spread across the private property areas every 10 metres, and there were 22,000 of these. It was an amazing effort. There's the Rat Eradication program team of dozens of fit young and old people would go around these bait stations and replenish them. And it also included monitoring stations, tracking tunnels and cameras. It was an amazing effort, and I'm so impressed with how the Lord Howe Island Board operated and the team, how they operated, and they were extremely welcoming of the dog team as well. So it was a really good experience all round. And one of the important things of the program was using GIS, live GIS tracking, and they used a program called Fulcrum. There's several of these types of programs available which you can put on smartphones and iPads. And you can see here, this is the network of the bait stations that were across the island, and you can live track to each of those stations and log in various details, including how many baits were taken and whether you replenished it, and looking at the various monitoring sites as well. So that was extremely useful. So you could virtually have live monitoring of what was going on, and so it ensured that you weren't going to miss any of the key sites. This was also extremely valuable for running the dogs. So not only could we track around these areas, but with each station has got a flagging tape and a number on it, so we knew exactly where we were at any stage. It was important also to access the properties with a guide. So each day the dog handler would be escorted by one of the Lord Howe Island Board team, usually and mostly locals, so born and bred locals, because they were familiar with all the residents. And as you may know, that some of the residents in the island weren't particularly comfortable with the rodent eradication program. So it was very important to have some locals involved to make sure that the properties we were going on to, they were happy with their presence, and to negotiate timing and things like that. And they were importantly backed up by a communications team. So each day there would be a schedule developed by the communications team, and that would be communicated to our guide for the day, and then we'd work those properties. And the searching included all of the property, the natural areas within that, and often that had natural vegetation, but also under houses, importantly, and in sheds. So it was a fairly big effort all round. Okay, so this is one of the houses that we were visiting. So a great variety of buildings. There's a lot of course, accommodation there for tourists. So we covered all the hotels and private properties. And the objective was to search all the properties at least twice. And this included also the Lord Howe Island Board dogs and Steve Austin's dogs. So they were Springers and Cockers, but we had our 2 terriers to add to the mix. So we worked through it, and I'm pretty sure we managed to get around all the properties at least twice between us. This started in October and ran through to December at the end of the initial monitoring program. One of the things we had to do, there was lots of timber and various accumulated collections of rubbish in people's sheds. It was amazing how much people hoard things on islands, and so we'd spend a lot of time, particularly when the dogs showed interest, unpacking timber, stored timber, and cleaning out sheds. Prior to us doing this, they did do a major clean-up in all the properties as well, so it sort of helped make the job easier, but there was still a lot of effort to getting around all of the properties. One of the key things for ensuring the dogs were on their game is that the REP, as we call it, the Rodent Eradication program team, would put out blinds. So they'd plant rats, and unbeknownst to us, in some of the areas that we'd be searching each day. So some days there may not be a blind put out. Sometimes there would be one put out, and occasionally there'd be 2 put in the areas we're searching. So it kept the dogs on their game, and it also served as a really good reinforcement training for them as well. So it's very important, as you know, to keep the dogs happy, and they need success to build their enthusiasm. So it worked really well. The dogs were getting most of the blinds most of the time, and so that gave us a high degree of confidence that they were able to find rats. We found with Nui, he's been trained with relatively fresh rodents, and particularly live ones, whereas the biosecurity dogs were more, they were keen to find anything. So they spent a lot of time finding everything from virtually small molecules of rodents, bones and all sorts of things. No, wasn't particularly interested in in anything too desiccated. He was sort of half interested in this one. I think he might have found this one. But he is much more interested in anything fresh. So his reaction is quite different when he sees a desiccated or finds a desiccated thing like this. It's more general interest if he's got a fresh rat, which during this exercise was only dead ones that were put out as blinds. He barks and he gets really excited. So we're really confident with our efforts that Nui didn't come across anything very freshly dead or live during our period there, even though he found occasionally these mummified things. You can see here, we also, within the build-up area, there's also some small reserves. So because in these areas had the bait stations in them as well. And so we had to check those through the period. And you can see here, Nui, he's onto a blind there that's just been tucked away in the root of these big fig trees. We found, in fact, the program found that most of the rats were located big nests in these massive fig trees, banyan trees, and so they spent a lot of time putting bait stations and putting baits into these, hand baiting some of these areas to ensure that the rodents were gone. Okay, so as far as monitoring goes, we had Garmin collars on all the dogs, and these were uploaded each day. And so we ended up, over the few months we were there, it was over 160 odd hours of effort by the dogs, and 360 odd kilometres that were traversed in all their efforts across these properties. So you can see the enormous effort that they've done on all these properties, all those red lines, and that represents going over several properties, the same properties at least twice. While we were there, we also had some sightings of rats, and the team responded to that by putting out, intensifying the trapping effort, and also putting dogs over those areas just to determine whether the sighting was correct or not. Even though that with all that effort, we didn't manage to find anything. Almost certainly false positive sightings, I'd imagine. And so we're pretty confident that there's no live rat or mice on the island since we left, and I believe there's nothing has been sighted that's positive since December. And so we're going over a couple of hundred days since a live rodent was sighted on the island. I know Simon Paho has just joined us, so he might be able to update us a little later on the current situation, if Simon's able to. This is Nui having a bit of a time off on the beach. That was one of the great things for Nui, compared with his double jackets on Macquarie Island. He had the best time because he didn't have to wear any clothes on Lord Howe Island, and so working in the subtropics was much more to his liking, that's for sure, and certainly to mine. Anyway, so that's all from me and Sue, and I'll hand back to Emma and any questions you may have.
Awesome. Thanks, guys. That was really interesting. I just want to comment on what you said about the live versus dead. Obviously, the dogs we have at work are trained on dead stuff, and they're not really interested in live or very fresh products. We have to sort of push them on it. So it's interesting that your dogs were being tested on the very dead, which is probably adds another element of unrealism to the testing, but it's great. I want to throw it over for questions. There's a lot of people here, so I'm sure there's lots of questions that people would like to have. I'm happy to throw it out there and try and be orderly. If you unmute, I'll see it and I'll say your name and we'll get your question. Oh, well, we've got one from Ebony. She's put it in the chat. Are there any native rodents that you had to train for or avoid? You'll just need to unmute, Mark and Sue. You keep yours unmuted, you'll be right.
Yep, go.
Okay, how does that sound?
Yep.
Okay. No, there's no native terrestrial mammals on Macquarie Island. There's only seals and seabirds there. But for Lord Howe Island, they do have a couple of species of bats. Those are the only mammals, is that correct? And then everything else is bird life. So there aren't any native mammals. So interestingly, we've had dog Clay, who's 10 years old. She's worked on cats. That's her main target, but she's happy to work on anything. So she worked on rabbits, but she also does rodents as well. So in the absence of cats and rabbits, she is more than happy to hunt down some rodents as well. So we just topped her up on her training for rodents and got her onto that. Whereas Nui is full time on rodents, and so in both those places, no, there's no native similar species.
One of the other great things about Lord Howe Island and Macquarie too is there's no snakes. So it was a joy to work the dogs. You know, it would have been a nightmare going through all those buildings and piles of wood with snakes had they been on Lord Howe Island.
Excellent. Just another question. Are terriers your breed of choice and why?
We've got quite a few dogs, and terriers are one breed that we've got. We've got Labradors, Shepherds, and terriers, and but there's quite a lot of rodent work. I mean, and rabbits, and so terriers are good for that. And it's not to say anything else is good for that. It was my third working dog that I got was Clay, because of my connection with conservation dogs. I'm strongly connected with the team in New Zealand, because Australia's been, you know, I mean, now it's all over the place, but back in the 90s and the 2000s, it was all in New Zealand, and there was very little happening in Australia. And so I'd connected into the New Zealand team over there, and my third dog that I got, I had the two from Macquarie Island, cat dogs. One was a GSP and the other one was a curly coat, and they both came from New Zealand. I came in as a dog handler, not as a trainer at that point. But the next dog I got was Clay, and as Mark said before, she came from the line of Tui, who's a fox terrier. And New Zealand use a lot of terriers because they've got stoats and rats and mice and rabbits, and they use a lot of terriers. And so, you know, for me, because of my strong connection with them, that was where we started with terriers. And they're great. You know, certainly there's no shortage of drive. It's more about getting them off the non-targets than getting them onto any particular target. But yeah, you know, not impossible to do. And yeah, we've been really happy with the ones that we've used. And one of the things that came out of the Lord Howe Island work with the Springers is that Springers see the world in a certain way, and terriers see the world in a different way. And the team leaders over there had an understanding of that, and they were actually keen to get a different breed of dog other than spaniels, just so that they weren't missing anything, and just to give a diversity of opinion, basically, on okay, what's happening in any space when you know, if a Springer says, oh, we found something, and then you bring in a terrier who's much more interested in live stuff than dead stuff, then you get an indication of, okay, no, I reckon it's dead stuff that we're looking at here. So yeah, they're good as part of a mix, but yeah, so anyway, yeah, they're just part of the mix.
There's a few more questions coming through. They just wanted a question about your permission from the residents going on their property to check for rodents, and how that played out. Was there any problems around that?
That was very much led by the comms team, the Lord Howe Island board, and they were amazing. There was a group of mostly women in there that and some locals, and so they knew who to talk to and the problem ones that may have been there. So they organised that each day and passed that on to our daily guide. So we didn't have to worry about any of that. We'd just be directed when and where to start, and our guide would manage all that. So it was pretty seamless, actually. I was really impressed with the organisation of the Lord Howe Island Board team.
And what about the baits that they had? The baits harmful to dogs? I know they were in closed containers. They probably couldn't access them, but was the baits themselves a problem or a risk?
Oh yeah, potentially, but yeah, as you say, the baits are mostly in the lockable bait stations. There was some hand baiting when we had some signs in some of the areas, but the baits are put down deep into holes, where a rat's nest or a mouse nest may be, and sometimes up high in the tree in some of those banyans. They'd get them up high in the tree, so generally not accessible to the dog at all. So we weren't concerned about that, and generally our dogs are not food reward anyway, so they're more, and certainly well, both of them are just looking for rats. Once they're on, then that wouldn't distract them at all, so we didn't have any fear of that.
Just so the questions are coming thick and fast. I'm not sure if you can see the chat on the side there. Some of them are privately to me. I'm just going to go back to yours at the end, Jessica. That's a bit of advice for someone that's starting. I'm just trying to read them. Going between the different climates, how do you ensure that the welfare of the dog while travelling such significant different distances and going between such vast climates, between tropical and subantarctic?
Yeah, okay, so for Nui, well, between his Macquarie work and the Lord Howe Island work, he was having, there's generally a break. Had the Lord Howe Island work was between October and December last year, was that right? Yep. And I've got another rodent dog that was doing the work in Tasmania, so I was able to send Nui to Lord Howe, which he thoroughly enjoyed with the temperature. He's not that keen on it being super cold at Macquarie, hence all the jackets and keeping him in warm accommodation. Though that the slide with the 15 dogs on it, they basically stayed outside. So because they were there for 2 to 3 years, they were all quite acclimatised. Some of them did wear jackets in the winter. Some of the springers needed jackets. They've got quite thin coats, and the labs did pretty well. But moving them between that in itself is not really a problem. For me, they're not basically going from Macquarie to Lord Howe, although I can't imagine that would be a problem for the dog because it's quite warm. So yeah, it's just being mindful, and keeping an eye on your dog. We had Clay got hypothermic in Western Australia one time. We had her over there doing some cat work, and it was below zero, and even with the jacket on. And in the morning, I couldn't work out what was wrong with her until we actually took her temperature, and we thought, okay, she's a degree lower than she should be. And we were taking her to the vet because we couldn't work out what was wrong with her, but she was actually hypothermic. So it is actually something to look out for.
Yeah. And she's an older dog, of course, so you've got to be conscious of older dogs. And Nui's a younger dog too, so he's got a little way to get to his peak. So in a year or two, I'd imagine that he'll be much more comfortable on Macquarie Island.
And just to finish up, just some general advice for people that are interested in getting started in conservation dogs, and just some general tips for people that are moving into this field. Sorry to put you on the spot like that.
Well, if you're thinking about it, I would, often the work it always involves non-targets, and it's super important to get dogs off non-targets, and generally the non-targets are birds. Like, depending, if you've got a specific project which is bird related, then you know what you're doing. But if you're going into pest type work, it is usually rats, mice, rabbits, cats. That's just my experience. And so all dogs are just off birds. And so if you have a dog from a pup, then from a very early age, you expose them to chickens and you make sure that they do not chase chickens. They're just off birds, and that is a fantastic start. You can always bring in a certain target, even if you get them on one particular target. It's actually not that difficult to train them on another target. They might always hold that first target, and you can have dogs with multiple targets. If you want to get into the conservation type work, you might want to think about just putting time into just having dogs that don't chase birds or reptiles, which are generally the non-targets.
I'd also add that it's always good to have a good mentor, and Sue touched on it, and they're still mentoring us as the New Zealanders. We're building a good network here in Australia, so with good people with good experience, so those starting off should attach themselves to any of us that have got some experience, and it's always going to be a learning experience. I mean, each time we go out, we're learning something new, depending on what the job is and where we're going. So, but yeah, definitely attach yourself to someone who had some experience. That will make life so much easier.
I'd like to second that, Mark, as someone who did this for 8 years, not knowing any of you existed on my own, walking around paddocks. The network and learning from other people with different experience is one of the best things you can do, for sure.
Yeah.
Well, we're getting close to 7 o'clock. Unless anyone's got any more pressing questions, we might let Mark and Sue wrap up. I do want to do another spruik for the membership, just to remind people it's only $30 a year to be a member of the ACDN. We're all volunteers working really hard to get this network running, and I think we're all doing an awesome job. And I would like to see as many people as we can sign up. It helps us get future funding, and it'll help us grow the network and get some credibility in terms of dealing with government agencies and people like that, the more members we have. So if everybody that's not a member is in here tonight, it would be great if you could become a member. Is there anything else you wanted to say before we stop the recording?
Simon, if you can hear me, are you able to tell us what the current situation is with the rodents on Lord Howe?
Yeah, so just hey guys, super quickly, I'm on Lord Howe at the moment. I was ground ops manager last year when Mark and Sue came out. So the last freshly dead rodents were found on the 9th of October last year. So it's just 252 days today since the last confirmed rodent sign. So we did have one scare about 5 weeks ago where there was a confirmed mouse on the ship that services the island, which was a good kick in the bum for management here now that we're trying to get biosecurity up to scratch. But yeah, 252 days with just one near hiccup.
Excellent. That's great to hear. Well, thank you so much, Mark and Sue. That was awesome. I wanted to hear a summary of what you guys are doing, and that was great. I'm going to stop the recording now.